We are going to start with the chapter number 3 of class 8 history. In this chapter we will understand the ruling countryside. So it is talking about the Britishers, that how they started to control the all other the parts of the India. Okay, in this particular chapter we will also talk about the revenues, that how they control the revenue part. Okay, and how they always tried to deny with the administration, because administration was always a problem for them, and they wanted to avoid the administration responsibility, rather than they were interested in making revenues and profits. Okay. So let's get started with the chapter. So the company becomes the Diwan. So we have already understood, we have already talked about the previous wars, about the 1757, the Battle of Plassey, and later on 1764, that how the Battle of Buxar, and how after the Battle of Buxar that the Britishers became the Diwan. It means the Diwani rights was given by the Mughal emperor to the British company. Okay, so now they had the control over the revenues. Okay, so let's move on. On the 12th August 1765, the Mughal emperor appointed the East India Company as the Diwan of Bengal. Okay, why? Because they had already defeated who? Britishers had already defeated the combined armies of the Mughal and the Bengal Nawab, and also the Nawab of Awadh. So when we will discuss about this particular part in the later on chapters, then we will see it in the complete details, that who were those people who contested against the Britishers and how they got defeated. Okay, so but in favor of that, they got the control of the Diwani rights. So as the Diwan company became the chief financial administrator of the territory under its control, at administrating the land and organizing its revenue resources. Of course, now because they were controlling all these parts, so yields enough revenue to meet the growing expenses of the company. Since we have already understood that earlier they had to bring the bullion from England, rather than now, instead of bringing all those bullion, which means gold and the silver from the Britain, rather than they started to getting all those revenue which was getting generated in the Bengal, they started using it to fund their expenses of the wars and to purchase the raw materials. Remember this. So it could buy the products they needed and sell what it wanted. Okay, so revenue of the for the companies, the effort was to increase the revenue as much as it could and buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaply as possible. So it was the trick that when they will purchase it on the lesser charges or the lesser amount, by paying the lesser amount, then of course they are going to make the huge profit out of it, of course. So this was the trick. So artisans were deserting village, since they were being forced to sell their goods and the company at the low price. Because now what was company doing? That company was monopolizing the that trade and all other activities of the artisans. So we will see that how the particular trading activities of the people who were living in the Bengal and who were trading or who were the artisans, they become very poor and their conditions will become very bad. Why? Because the arbitrary decisions of these Britishers, and they always wanted to get the things on the cheaper rate, and since they were the now became the Diwans, okay, so there was no one to listen to them. They had the complete control on the Bengal. Okay, hence there was no person to listen to them, and there was no one to contest with the British on the behalf of the artisans. Okay, so they were living in a very bad condition. So artisanal products was in decline, of course, because when they were not getting the enough money, then why somebody would be indulged into a work where they need to take money and use they need to produce the raw materials, and in exchange of that they are not getting the enough money to sustain their life. Okay, so this is always a bad model, and hence these artisans who were earlier prospering in the Mughal state or in the rule of the Bengal Nawab, now they started to decline and they started to move out of the particular reign. So in 1770, a terrible famine killed 10 million people in Bengal. About one third of the population was wiped out. Why it was wiped out? We need to ask this question, because Britishers had no interest in administering those areas where they controlled it. Okay, now their interest was to control the revenues and make the more profit. When their intention was this, then why they would invest their money to take care of the people who are living in their that particular area of Bengal? Okay, hence these people died because of the hunger and the other problems which occurred because of the famine. So remember this. So now an image has been shown that how the hearts used to conduct it, and the people used to bring the different things and they used to exchange all those things. Okay. Now it is talking about the need to improve the agriculture. Why there was a need of improving the agriculture? Understand, because we have already seen that in that time agriculture was an important part used to pay in terms of providing the money to kings or the nawabs. Okay, so it used to play a huge role in the administration, because the kings always wanted to have the money so that they can keep the things going. Okay, and the different traders were there, other things was happening. So hence the agriculture became the important or the backbone of any kingdom or any rule. So company also wanted to get the profits. Okay, and they, since they have got the money, so they wanted to make more money. And what was the way? The agriculture was the way, one of the ways through which they got the money, and the agriculture was one of them. The company finally introduced the permanent settlement in 1793. So remember this particular fact, it becomes really important, that in which year company introduced the permanent settlement system. So it introduced it in 1793. So now we will understand the characteristics of the permanent settlement system, that how and why it was introduced. Okay, and how it impacted the life of those people who were indulged into the agriculture. So Rajas, Talukdars were recognized as the Jamidar and asked to collect the rent from the peasant and pay revenue to the company. So it was the task given to the Rajas and the Talukdar, okay, who were recognized as the Jamidar by whom? These Britishers. Okay, and all those people who were loyalist to these Britishers, they were given task to control or to bring the revenue and submit that revenue to the company. So amount to be paid was fixed permanently. So these are the characteristics. So remember what was happening, the peasant used to pay the revenue to the company and amount to be paid was fixed permanently. Okay, so this was one characteristic of the permanent settlement. Another was that it was not to be increased ever in future. Why they thought to do such kind of thing? Because they felt that it would ensure a regular flow of the revenue, and these zamindars who have been given the chance of controlling all those areas and to collect the revenues, they will also put their efforts, since they will also get some money. Okay, but it was not happening and they never did. Who? Jamidars never put their efforts, because on the behalf of jamidars, they probably hire or they arrange some other people who were working from them to collect these revenues, and they shown no interest, okay, to increase the or to make any changes in the agriculture. Hence this particular settlement arrangement got flopped. So we will see. Okay, so Cornwallis was the Governor General of India when the permanent settlement was introduced. So two factors or three factors we have already understood which are important. Permanent settlement implemented in 1793, and who was the Governor General at that time? It was Cornwallis. We have also seen the characteristic, it was fixed and it was promised to be never increased in the future. Okay, now what was the problem? So we have already understood the problem. The permanent settlement, however, created problems. Jamindar not investing in improvement of the land. The revenue that had been fixed was so high that the Jamindar found it difficult to pay. Anyone who failed to pay the revenue lost his Jamindari. So this particular fact I have to highlighted, but becomes really important. Okay, so this is the one of those regions which caused the failure of this particular arrangement. So these revenues, like the rates were very high. Okay, anyone who failed to pay the revenue lost his jamidari. So why somebody would be interested losing his jamidari? Okay, so in first place they were never interested to doing such kind of thing. So first decade of 19th century, the situation changed. How? The prices in the market rose, an increase in the income of Javidari, but no gain for the company. So now what was happening, that the prices of the grains and the other things increased in the market. Hence Jamidar got the huge amount of profit. But since the Britishers has already promised that the rates will not be increased, hence they were receiving a limited amount. Now the purpose of Britishers was to gain the profit. Why they would compromise on the profit? Okay. And the other expenses were also increasing because they were indulging into the different fights and the different areas. Okay. Now they wanted to fund their fights as well. Okay. These different battles and the other companies with whom they were competing. Okay. So these all things created a problem for the British arrangement. So as long as the Jamidar could give out the land to tenants and get the rent, they were not interested in improving the land. So we have already understood, because they never wanted to do, as far as they were receiving the money, they were happy. So now it is talking about an important fact. I have already marked it. What is now, it wants to provide us some information about the mahal. What is mahal? In British revenue record, mahal is a revenue estate which may be a village or a group of villages. So remember this, mahal could be one single village or could be a group of village. Okay, so now it will be talking about the next arrangement, that what type of arrangement they thought after this particular arrangement got failed, permanent settlement. New system is devised. Okay, in the northwestern province of Bengal presidency, most of this area is now under Uttar Pradesh. An English called Holt Mackenzie, so remember this particular name, Holt Mackenzie, devised the new system which came into effect in 1822. So we have already seen that earlier. We have already discussed that in what time that particular permanent settlement came into the existence, and now this came into 1822. And who brought it? This particular methodology devised by Holt Mackenzie. He felt that the village was an important social institution in the North Indian society. So we understand in today also, for a particular villager, it is the agriculture plays a dominant role. Okay, and the society plays an important role as well. Okay, so he understood all these tenets. So under his direction, collectors went from village to village. So now we are talking about the characteristics once again. So under his direction, collectors went from village to village, inspecting the land, measuring the fields, and recording the customs and the right of different groups. Okay, so these three things were happening. Collectors were moving from village to village, they were inspecting the land, they were measuring the field, they were recording it, okay, according to the rights and the customs, and estimated the revenue of each plot within a village, and was added up to calculated the revenue that each village or mahal had to pay. So now understand that, for an example, this particular village is here, okay, and it has divided into several plots or field. Now each field has been measured, and according to that, a particular payment has been, they calculated that what would be the particular amount from this particular land and what would be the amount they would be receiving from this particular tract. So all in all, this was added up, that ultimately they will pay, for an example, 100 rupees after calculating all these lands. Okay, so they calculated it 100 rupees. Now this was the responsibility of the village headman to collect these 100 rupees and to pay this 100 rupees to whom? To the Britishers. Okay, so this was under this particular system. Got it? So this demand was to be revised periodically, not permanently fixed. So now they understood from their previous mistake which they committed, that they did not fix it, rather than it was revised periodically. It was flexible. Okay, and the charges of the collecting the revenues, was paying it to the company, was given to the village headman. So we have already understood there. Okay, rather than Jamidar, it was the responsibility of the head of the village person. So this system came to be known as the Mahalwadi system. Remember this. So now we have understood about the Mahalwadi system, different aspect and characteristics, and who introduced this? Holt Mackenzie. Now here a particular image has been shown of Thomas Munro at the right hand side. Okay, and he was the governor of the Madras from 1819 to 26. So what was the Monroe system? Let us understand that as well. The new system that was devised came to be known as the Rayatwar or the Rayatwari, where in the southern part of India. Okay, so we have already seen about the permanent settlement, then we have seen in the northern part of the India. Okay, so we have seen about the particular settlement of Mahalwadi, and now we are talking about the Rayatwadi system or Rayatwar system. So it tried on a small scale by the Captain Alexander Reed, okay, and subsequently developed by the Thomas Munro. So there are two people involved. First, Alexander Reed, another person is Thomas Munro. So he developed it rather. So initially it was done by the Alexander Reed, but it was later on developed by Thomas Munro. This system was gradually extended all over the South India. Okay, so no traditional Jamidar was there in the southern. Okay, the settlement, they argued, had to be made directly with the cultivators, and the cultivators known in the southern part is as ryots, who had tilled the land of generations. From the generations they were doing or they were tilling the land. Okay, there was no system of jamidari, so it is all this is talking about. So their field had to be carefully and separately surveyed before the revenue assessment was made. So in this system also they were getting assessed, they were getting measured. Okay, so Monroe thought that the British should act as the paternal father figures protecting the riots under their charge. So this was the biggest problem of the Britishers, because always they used to think one or the other way that Indians are not civilized, and they are, and to provide them the all this education or correcting them in the different ways was the responsibility of Britishers. Okay, so Monroe also had the similar type of thought that the Britishers should act as the paternal father figure to protecting the riots under their charge. Okay, so in this system also all things were not good, because what was happening, that driven by the desire to increase the income of the land, revenue official fixed too high a revenue demand. So in this system also the revenue demands were very high. So peasant was unable to pay. So what they did, riots fled the countryside. So they just fled out. Okay. Optimistic officials had imagined that the new system would transform the peasant into rich enterprising farmer, but this did not happen, because they could not see that if they will keep the amount high, then the peasant would not be able to pay it, and ultimately they would have no option rather than fleeing from that area to the another area or the countryside. So the crops for the Europe. So now we will talk about the indigo, that how the indigo was really important. Okay, and how it played a really important role in the history of the that time in the modern India. Okay, so by the late 18th century the company was trying its best to expand the cultivation of opium and indigo. The British pursued or forced the cultivator in various parts of India to produce other crops such as jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in United Province, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, rice in Madras. So today also we see that more or less these type of crops are grown in all these parts which we have discussed. Okay, so these are called as the cash crops. Okay, so cash crops used to provide them the good amount of revenue. Okay, and their purpose of exporting these things such as the indigo to the European market, because it was in the huge demand that time. So now it has shown at the left hand side two different images. One, the Kalamkari print of the 20th century India, and a Moorish cotton print. There was a person or the artist, okay, with the name of Morris. Okay, so his print has been shown. So Kalamkari print created by the weavers of Andhra Pradesh in India. So remember this. So when we will cover the art and culture, then we will understand in more detail that how this particular uh, print is developed, or this painting is done. Okay, and how kalamkari is getting done, so we'll understand that. So right is a floral, so it has provided that a floral cotton print designed and produced by the William Morris, a famous poet and artist of the 19th century in Britain. India was the biggest supplier of the indigo in the world at that time. Okay, so because we understand now there was huge demand, so of course, and the Britishers controlling the Indian part, so now India was a biggest supplier of that time of the indigo in the European part. So why there was a demand for the Indian indigo? So indigo plant grow primarily in the tropics, and European cloth manufacturer therefore had to depend on the other plant called woad to make the violet and the blue dyes. So remember this particular name of the plant. It may be a straightforward question can be asked that the European manufacturer in the absence of the indigo used to depend on which plant. So that plant was woad, WOAD, woad. Remember this. Okay. So it used to provide the violet and the blue dyes. So it was grown in the northern Italy, southern France, and the part of Germany and Britain as well. So cloth dyes, however, preferred indigo as a dye. Why? Because it used to give a more rich color rather than the wool. Okay, so hence it was always in preference rather than this particular plant which we are talking. The French began to cultivating indigo in Saint Domingo in the Caribbean Sea, and the Portuguese in Brazil, English in Jamaica, and the Spanish in Venezuela. When something is of in demand, then all the people all of a sudden start to do the same type of thing. So in contemporary world, we also see that how the people in the, if we talk about the IT sector as well, if one thing is working, then they start to the other people also start to copy the same thing. So it was also happening with these people when this indigo dye became so popular in Europe and it was huge in demand. Then what they did, that apart from the Britishers who were cultivating the indigo in India, then French also got into this business of growing the indigo, and these other people. Okay, so they grown it on shown in the Caribbean island, the Portuguese in the Brazil, and English also in Jamaica, and Spanish in Venezuela. Okay, so this was happening. So indigo plantation also came up in the many part of the Northern America. So these type of things were happening. So the demand for the Indian indigo grew further. Britain began to industrialize, and since we understand that whenever any area or any country start to industrialize, then it requires anything in the huge demand. Why? Because now it more or less it start to become the mechanized, and in mechanism what happens that anything which becomes the mechanical, it start to produce thing at the faster speed, and the when something start to produce at the faster speed, and it requires the raw material at the larger scale, and also start to producing the finished product at the larger scale. Since this was the tenets, or this was the characteristic of the industrialization of the British as well, so hence the indigo also became the very popular and huge demand to fulfill all these requirement of the industries. So the cotton production expanded dramatically, and they created the enormous new demand for the cloth dyes. Okay, between 1783 and 1789, the production of indigo in the world fell by half. Why it was happening? While the demand for the indigo increased, its existing supplies from the West Indies and the America collapsed for a variety of the regions. Okay, so what was happening that the now since the demand has been gone down, okay, or the supply, what was happening, the demand for indigo increasing while the existing supplies from the West Indies and America started to collapse. Okay, and between 1780 through to 89, the production of the indigo of the world fell by half. Okay, so the cloth dyers in the Britain now desperately looked into for new resources of the indigo supply. Now the demand is increasing, they were not able to fulfill it, so now they were looking to the different areas to grow or to cultivate the indigo so that they can fulfill the demand of the British industries. Okay, now Britain turns to India for the production of the, or to get the indigo. Okay, so let us understand. From the last decade of the 18th century, indigo cultivation in Bengal expanded rapidly. Bengal indigo came to dominate the world market. Now, since we have already understood that there was huge demand, now it was started to cultivating in Bengal, and it became very much popular, and there was huge demand, and it started to dominate the world market. So as indigo trade grew, the commercial agents and the official of the company began investing in the indigo production because they saw that huge profit can be made by investing in these indigo plants and the doing this indigo business. Then they started to invest in it. How the it was the indigo cultivate how the indigo was cultivated. So there was two ways of cultivating the indigo. First was the niche and another was the riot. Okay, so we will understand the niche and the variety as well. So under the system of niche, the produced indigo in the lands that they directly control. Okay, and either bought the land or rented it from the jamidar. So what was happening, that any person, for an example, if a British servant, okay, of a company servant who wanted to invest in the indigo and wanted to grow the indigo, then they used to either purchase the land from the jamidar or they used to rent it from the jamidar. Okay, and they used to produce the indigo by directly employing or by hiring the laborers. So it was the niche method. And we will, what was the problems with the niche? Because if there are the ways of cultivating the different things, if there are if these things are growing, then there must be some problems as well, because there was a huge demand for that. Whether it was able to supply this particular demand or was able to fulfill it. So let us see, the planters found it difficult to expand the area under the niche cultivation. So planters needed a large area in compact blocks to cultivate the indigo in plantation. Okay, so it was really hard for them, because all these because the people who used to live, or they were living the life, or they were sustaining their life on these particular fields, they were growing the different crops which we have already seen. Okay, so when they were not getting these lands which were is huge or very large tract of the land, then they moved to on the another way, which was the way of the rayati. And what was happening in the rayatis? Under the rayati system, the planter forced the rayat to sign a contract or an agreement, which was agreement in that time used to called as the satta. Okay, so what was happening now, because they were not able to get the big lands, okay, under the niche, they started to make some sort of agreement which was called as the satta with the riots, and they signed the contract. So they will, how they will trap these people or the riots. Let us move ahead and understand that those who signed the contract got cashed in advance and from the planters at low rate of interest to produce the indigo. And now from here it starts to trap these cultivators or these people. But the loan committed the riots to cultivate the indigo on the at least 25% of the area under his holding. So now they were bound to do the, or for an example, if they had the 100 acres of land, then 25 acre of land had to be cultivated with the indigo. Okay, understand in this manner. The planter provided the seed and the drill and also the cash. We have already seen that they were providing the loan, while the cultivators prepared the soil, sowed the seed, and looked after the crop. All these things were done by whom? Cultivators. Okay, so most of the work was done by the cultivator himself. Okay, and after harvest, the indigo plant was taken to the wards. So what was these wards in the indigo factories? So it has provided the information that a wort was the fermenting or storage vessel. Okay, so there was the different type of activities were happening. The 3 or 4 words needed to manufacture the dye, and each word had a separate function. Okay, so what was the function? Let us read. So just an story to provide you more context about it, that how the indigo, what uh, apart from cultivating, how it used to convert it into a finished product. The leaves stripped off the indigo plant was first soaked in the warm water in the wort known as the fermenting or the steer wort for several hours. Okay, first process, when the plant fermented, the liquid began to boil and bubble. Now rotten leaves were taken out and the liquid ran into the another one. Second process, and they placed just below the first well. And the second wet known as the beater wort. The solution was continuously stirred and beaten with the paddle. So it used to be a stick type of thing. Okay, big stick. using which they used to stir it. When the liquid gradually turned green, then blue. Okay, so lime water was added to the wort, and gradually the indigo separated out in flakes. Muddy sediment settled at the bottom of the vat, and a clear liquid rose to the surface. So the liquid was drained off, and the sediment in the indigo pulp transferred to another wort known as the settling wort, and then pressed and dried for the sale. So hence these were the 3 or 4 processes which were involved, okay, in the final uh, to get the final finished product of the indigo. So understand that this was a very tough work, okay. So nobody wanted to do, and apart from if once a person has cultivated the indigo, it used to reduce the fertility of that particular land. And these uh, these people who were the planters, what they were doing, that they were also trapping these innocent farmers or the riots. So what was happening, they also had some sort of the frustration against them, okay. So after the indigo harvested, the land could not be sown with the rice. So this was the major problem. Now that person will have to suffer, okay, because immediately he cannot or she cannot grown the rice or sown the rice. Now how they will sustain their life? It was a major problem. So blue rebellion, and how they protested against these planters. So in the March 1859, thousands of riots in Bengal refused to grow indigo. Okay, so since they were not able to sustain their life, so why would they interested in doing something which is not profitable for them and would create problem? So those who worked for the planters were socially boycotted. So these were the methods in the earlier days, that if any person is not following any norm or any rule, then the people of the society or the people of the village used to socially boycott him or her. So the gomasthas, so remember these terms, gomasthas, agent of planters. Who were the gomasthas? Agent of planters who came to collect the rent were beaten up. Okay, so the agents who were coming there, they were also beaten up because they were frustrated. Who were frustrated? These farmers were frustrated. In many villages, had one who had been forced to sign the indigo contract, mobilized the indigo peasants, and fought the pitched battle with the lathias. Who were the lathias? The person who is carrying the lathi. So in the northern India, we understand that a huge stick is known or called as the lathi. Okay, so these were the people who used to carry the lathis, involved with the fight using the lathi. They used to call as the lathias. In other places, even the jamidars were around the villages, urging the riots to resist the planters. So understand, straightforward question can be asked, that how these people or the riots were supported by these village headmen, or whether they were supported or not. If this question appears in the PCS or PCS exam or UPSC, that whether in the indigo cultivation, the rebellion, whether it was supported or it was not supported, then you must remember that they were supported by these village headmen and the people or the jamidars, okay, with the help of the lathials, okay. So the lieutenant governor toured the region because there was a huge problem. Okay, people revolted. So the lieutenant governor had to tour the region in the winter of 1859. Okay, in the Banaras, the magistrate Ashley Aden issued a notice. So remember this particular name. So in Banaras, the magistrate, here lieutenant governor is touring the area. But later on in Banaras, the magistrate Ashley Aden issued a notice stating that riot would not be compelled to accept the indigo contracts. Word went around that the Queen Victoria, so it was some sort of misunderstanding, that people took it differently. All those riots who were rebelling or who were agitating, they took it differently. Okay, and they thought that these are the words of the Queen Victoria, and they declared that the indigo need not to be sown. So Aden was just trying to placate the peasant and control an explosive situation, but his action was read as the support for the rebellion. Okay, now these riots thought that the queen is really good and she had supported their movement. Okay, the government brought in the military to protect the planters from the assault and set up the Indigo Commission. So Indigo Commission has been set up, okay, to inquire into the system Okay, indigo production, and commission held the planters guilty. To whom the commission held guilty? Remember this, they held guilty these planters who were forcing these innocent riots or the farmers to come into the contract, and by providing the advances and creating all these problems. Okay, so commission asked the riot to fulfill their existing contract, but also told them that they could refuse to produce indigo in future. But if anybody has any existing contract, then they need to complete, and in future they can deny it. Okay, so there an interesting story has been told about this commission, okay, which has been set up. So the head was the W.S. Saturn, the president of Indigo Commission. So remember this, we are not going into this particular story, but I just wanted to provide the name of this particular person, W.S. Saturn. Okay, remember this. So he was the president of Indigo Commission. Okay, because we are already only understanding those parts which are really important for our examination purpose, and the purpose of reading should be that it should contain all the important facts, but at the time it should also save our times. Why I am also telling all these stories? Because I'm narrating the stories to provide some context. Whenever it is important, we are going through all those content which provide some context to your understanding. Okay, so after the revolt, the indigo production collapsed in Bengal. Of course, it was supposed to happen, but the planters now shifted their operation to Bihar. Okay, with the discovery of synthetic dye in the late 19th century, their business was severely affected. But yet they managed to expand their production. So now it is talking about that when they shifted to the Bihar, though synthetic dye, which was invented in the Germany, okay, and became very popular, but somehow these people who were getting cultivated these indigo in the Bihar, okay, they managed to expand. Okay, so we also read it in the modern India. Then when the Mahatma Gandhi came to India, and he was compelled and he was requested to visit the Champaran in 1970, okay, marked the beginning of the Champaran movement against the indigo planters. Okay, so other things which were happening at that time as well. So we have understood the important terms and important things related to the rule of these particular Britishers, that how after getting the Diwani rights, okay, how they started to exploit, and why the indigo became so important, and how they were also revolted, and later on when they shifted to the Bihar, they started to exploit there as well. Because, and ultimately what happened, that people had to compel and had to request Mahatma Gandhi to visit, and uh, it started, or it gave the momentum or the beginning of the Champaran movement, okay, against these indigo planters. So we will understand this in detail when we will cover this particular portion of Mahatma Gandhi after coming in the India. So remember all these important things, try to note down all these important facts which I have already covered. Though I have mentioned the important facts, just revise them and keep learning. If you have not liked the video or subscribed the channel, then please like and subscribe the channel, and also share these initiatives with your friends and fellow aspirants. I will see you in the next chapter. Till then, Jai Hind.